Dr. Kevin, good morning. I'm delighted to have you around. Can you explain who you are and what you do?
Good morning. My name is Kevin Kariuki. I'm the Vice President for Power, Energy, Climate Change and Green Growth at the African Development Bank. In that role, we are responsible for ensuring that Africa addresses its energy poverty in a sustainable manner and also in a manner that enables us to mobilize sufficient climate finance for the continent.
Can you tell me what are the challenges facing the continent as far as financing climate is concerned?
Thank you very much. The challenge today is that, first of all, the biggest challenge is that Africa only accounts for 3% of climate finance globally, despite the fact that Africa is the country that bears the brunt of climate change globally. So with 3%, there's only so much you can do. But at the African Development Bank, we have tried to address the climate change, the climate finance issue purely because we understand that the current level of climate finance is entirely due to the climate finance architecture globally. So what we've done is that we've gone out of our way in order to address that those challenges in the architecture to try and mobilize climate finance for the continent. So in the first place, the bank has committed to mobilizing $25 billion, basically doubling our climate finance of between 2020 and 2025. And of that, today, 67% is adaptation finance. But that will not be enough. So what we did is that beyond that, we even we have established what we call the Africa Adaptation Acceleration Program to mobilize another $25 billion for adaptation. That is still not enough.
It doesn't work?
No, not yet. So what we've done is that we said as part of our new climate change and green growth policy that we need to increase or we need to target increasing Africa's access to climate finance from the current 3% that I mentioned earlier to 10% by 2030. But that is still not enough because the demands for climate finance on the continent, just to give, I've talked about the percentages, but I need now to talk about in absolute terms. Africa's climate finance needs are $127 billion per year through 2030. And the 3% I spoke about only constitutes about $18 billion. So there is a huge gap. So,
where are you going to compensate that?
So what we are trying to do is, first of all, we are trying to establish what we call the climate action window. And basically here what we are saying is that since we know that Africa's climate change is locked in for the next 20 years, in other words, even if we do absolutely nothing, even if we don't emit 1 gram, we will still face the adverse weather impact that we are seeing today. What we've done is that we're saying, let us try and do something more for our more vulnerable countries that are least adaptive to climate change.
So what do you do concretely?
So what we have done is that we are establishing a 4 to 13 billion climate action window that will provide resources that, number one, will bridge that huge gap that you're asking me about. And number two, that will provide those resources in an efficient manner, because today you may apply for climate financing, but it takes you up to 5 years. By that time, you are addressing different problems. So we are trying inadequacy, efficiency, and lastly, the cost of climate finance, because most of the countries that you are talking about are under heavy debt distress. And as a result of the debt distress, if you are going to borrow more money to address those impacts of climate change, you're actually exacerbating the situation. So what we are saying, we want now to be able to, especially for the very poor of our continent's countries, we are trying to provide these resources at more as concessional loans and grants in order to basically reduce the debt burden as a result of climate change impacts. Mark you, Africa has only contributed up to 3% of global greenhouse emissions. So in other words, they are suffering
from the consequences of
from,
other
from,
people.
from problems that they never caused,
They never caused at all.
that they were caused by somebody else. But we are where we are. So as a bank, it behoves us to try and understand the challenges that they go through. And therefore, that's why we've come up with all these initiatives that I've articulated with a view to making sure that African countries are also able to get their due share of climate finance.
Yeah, so when we talk about justice, do you think that we are getting there? Are you hopeful?
Justice is a difficult one, but we can only do, as a bank, what we can only do is to try and project Africa's voice as loudly as we can. Because justice is not only from our bank perspective. What we are saying by justice is that there must be Africa's special circumstances must be borne in mind when it comes to allocating these global climate finances. In other words, I actually say there must be some form of affirmative action in favor of Africa because of its special circumstances. As we just said, contributed the least and yet bears the brunt of climate impacts.
Dr. Kevin, thank you so much.
It's my pleasure. Thank you very much.